Usually I do my best to promote, what's coming up on a given day here on KCMO, but sometimes I forget. So I get the crack staff in there, John and Mark, to handle that. So, they put up a tweet this morning saying important conversation between Quinton Lucas and Pete Mundo coming up at 7:30 on 95.7 FM. And the mayor kind enough to share it, saying he's looking forward to a calm, reasoned, and objective discussion with facts. Listen in to the well-named KCMO radio here in Kansas City and surrounds, or online for those far and beyond. So here we are on 95.7 FM and the KCMO Talk Radio app with the mayor of Kansas City, Quinton Lucas, joining us. And let's start off, Mr. Mayor, with obviously what has been a pretty interesting couple of days. A report from Bloomberg suggesting that the city is working on welcoming illegal immigrants from Denver and New York City to Kansas City. How long has this been in the works?
I think your framing is off entirely. They are lawfully present individuals in our country. If you read the story, which few have, right, it actually speaks to those who have work permits. Those are things that are approved by our federal government. These are people who are allowed to be here, often asylum seekers, but there may be any number of others who are looking for a place to be able to work. We had no conversations about just taking large swaths of undocumented persons, although I would advise you there already are people like that who walk among us now and at meatpacking plants and on farms throughout Missouri and Kansas. But what we're trying to do is say, if you are somebody who is in the process, going through the process, and you are here present lawfully, then yes, we are a community where someone can come in, find work. We have the need for work. That story cites several big projects. There are many more. And we welcome that sort of thing as a place that has always welcomed new American arrivals.
The House Judiciary Committee put out a study late last year that showed only 6% of those who came into the country here over the last couple of years were found to have legitimate fears of persecution. So are you suggesting then that these individuals all are legitimate asylum seekers, or are the numbers being fudged by the federal government? And how do you know what's what and what's real and what's not?
I believe in something called the Supremacy Clause, and it suggests the fact that the federal government gets to make determinations in certain areas. And so I am not the Secretary of Homeland Security. I am not the President of the United States. I'm not in the United States Congress. Those are decisions for them to make as to who gets through the process, if they are lawfully here, and what types of steps are taken thereafter. What we are doing, what I am doing and saying for Kansas City, is that if you are someone who's lawfully present, and by the way, this is just very simply following federal law, if you are someone who's lawfully present, has a permit to work, then we are a place where people can find good opportunities and good work opportunities long term. This is no different than past waves of immigration in our country. And actually, I was studying for once for this interview. My view on this issue is similar to Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, the Republican senator who worked on these issues. It certainly is similar to the last Republican president to try to address the issue, George W. Bush. And it frankly just follows federal law. What I would question is many of those, some are in my comments, and many others perhaps that talked to your show or called, who are saying they don't want those with work permits to be able to work. So in that view, they are allowed to be in the United States lawfully in any of our 50 states, but for some reason they should just be sitting around becoming wards of the state or perhaps presenting some level of challenge. I mean, I believe in border security. I believe in a federal immigration system that makes sense, but I also believe if we designated that people can work, they should be able to find work. And here in this part of the country, we certainly have a lot of work to do, something that we're proud of and something that we'll keep trying to generate.
Do you look at this, Mr. Mayor, though, for these cities like Denver and New York that are having incredible issues with illegal immigration, do you look at them and say, okay, if these are people who truly want to work, who really, are getting work permits and really want to get out there into the labor force, why are they going to come to Kansas City? And why would Denver or New York send the people who actually want to work? Why would they ship them out your way?
I think there are a few different issues, and I've had the chance to visit with the mayors of both of those cities and others who face this crisis in much greater numbers. I think there are a few issues that those of you who watch this on cable news or see elsewhere are seeing. A lot of the people they're receiving do not have work permits, and indeed tens of thousands of people, whether it's New York or Chicago, are sitting there without work permits, so they have nothing that they can lawfully do. They are just existing, right, in some place where the government, usually the local or the state government, is funding their survival. And so for me, I think what we would say is, we would only right now. I think if there was some sort of programmatic effort, welcome those who have lawful work permits, those who have gone through the system and the process, and those for whom, right, we in every city and state in the country have some obligation to allow them the opportunity to work. That is actually just foundational. I know there are lots of people who evaluate laws and whatever responses they can have, and other than passing kind of toothless resolutions, this is American law. You or I have the opportunity as citizens, of course, to go to Alaska tomorrow, pitch up a tent and say, hey, I'd like to find a job here. If these persons are lawfully present, they have the opportunity to do so. What Kansas City is not, nor has it ever been, is a sanctuary city. First of all, perhaps to the wise judgment of past legislatures, I disagree, but we don't actually have local control of the police. And so the police are under an obligation to enforce our state and federal laws at issue. They continue to do so, although they certainly prioritize those things that are the biggest issues for us. So, I think that there is a kind of a tempest, a firestorm perhaps erupting, when really, my comments are a little more bland than one might otherwise think. All are welcome here. If you go through the processes to be here and you are lawfully present in the United States and therefore Kansas City, then we welcome you. And if you are sitting in Denver right now or in New York City, two cities that are fine, but I prefer Kansas City to them, and you want to find work and you have a valid work permit, come on board. I actually have trouble seeing what the problem with that even is.
Well, just to be clear, I mean, when you say lawfully present, clearly what you're referring to are non-citizens who have crossed, in many cases, our southern border, who then are claiming asylum, even though we know a lot of those asylum claims are not legitimate. That's who we're talking about in part, right?
That would be a category of persons that falls in the description. Yes, sir.
So then what, when you look at what this means for Kansas City, we also know that, this issue has caused Denver to spend $180 million right now, $10 million in unpaid medical costs in recent years, $100 million to provide shelter, medical care, schooling for asylum seekers. The number could jump. They project to $180 million. You've got $1 million set aside right now. So do you think that's enough money for this plan?
I don't think we in any way would get the volume of asylum seekers that either Denver, New York City, or Chicago does. I don't even think we'd get a proportional share for what our city is. What we are doing and saying is very different. And I had an opportunity to visit with the mayor of El Paso, Texas, actually on this issue a while back. As you'd imagine, right, he's one who is very into border security. And usually when people enter at El Paso, and many do, right, they're processed to somewhere else, often being asked, where do you want to go, Chicago, New York, or Denver? And they're picking one of those buses or ways of transportation and being sent to those American cities. So, no, I don't think that we are the big, enticing, exciting place when somebody crosses the border and says, I want to go to Kansas City. I think what we're saying is if you are people who are interested in work, if we can link you to work opportunities, housing opportunities, then we will try to find some place that you can settle here. This is no different, I think, than when we had Afghan refugees who came to Kansas City. And although there was some news at the very beginning when they got here, 500 refugees from Afghanistan came. We have since settled them in our community. I've bumped into some of them along the way. Good working people on the pathway to becoming American citizens. I think that's a wonderful story for us. So, no, I don't see us all of a sudden welcoming 50,000 people. I would see us welcoming more like 50 people, and making sure that they have the support necessary to be able to establish themselves and integrate in this community. In the event that their asylum claims are dismissed or rejected by federal officials, they will be repatriated to their country of origin. And I think that we will always follow the law. That's one thing I vow to uphold in both directions. So if these people, and you can describe them as asylum seekers and question their nature of entry, but they are lawfully here, if they have a work permit and they have gone through processes to be here and DHS is tracking them, knows what they are and what they're doing, then I think that they have a right to be here, but they also need to go, at which point they no longer have lawful presence in the U.S.
So you trust this administration in particular when it comes to who they're handing and who they're granting asylum to and who they're not. You trust this administration on that front, despite quite a bit of evidence to the contrary.
I absolutely trust this administration. Point out to me where they're in any way less adequate in their approach than prior administrations. Now, granted,
I got 11 million
Trump,
reasons on that front. Maybe it's 10 million, but 11 million reasons on that front.
There have been unlawful entries during the Trump years, particularly outside of COVID. You saw that during the George W. Bush, Barack Obama years. This has been a generational crisis in the United States. And so, yes, we can try to say, looking at a very recency bias type of discussion, that this is all President Biden's fault and this is a system created by him. But look, there are separate realities, which, by the way, some Senate Republicans working with the president and working with congressional Democrats have tried to cure. We need more actual border security agents. We need more investment there. We need more hearing officers. We need more judges. We need more resources for people who are lawfully present. These are things that both the President of the United States, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Senator Langford of Oklahoma, President Bush in the past, everyone has been pushing for. For some reason, it seems that President Trump and any number of others are uninterested in actually addressing the crisis other than banging on their phone keyboards and saying it's a disaster. I'm interested in seeing a long-term federal solution as a person who lives in middle America, rather than just saying, hey, there are a lot of people around. Where do they go? And I think that takes a holistic approach. The president's trying to do that, so I do have confidence.
Listen, you know, Mr. Mayor, as well as I do. The guy in charge right now is not interested in any kind of approach. He let 10 million people into the country. Now it's an election year, and he's like, we got to do something. I mean, that you are a very bright man. You know that as well as I do. Will you give me that much? This is all election politics here.
The president has given, 50 years plus to public service in our country. I believe that he has probably voted on every issue relating to border security since the early 1970s. I think that he has great interest in having us come to an actual solution. The actual solution isn't just that we throw a bunch of people in camps and put them all back immediately, because, A, we have had too many people in this country for generations. This is why President Reagan did a blanket amnesty, which is something that is not being proposed right now. But I think it's why many people, and this has been the problem of so many crises in America recently, many mayors around the country are fighting themselves, saying, oh, my gosh, I have a bunch of people here. What do we do? That's why the mayor of Denver and the mayor of New York, by the way, no progressive really, right, who are saying, my gosh, we have to come up with a way to find where people can work, where they can live, how they can be housed, and so many other issues. Where Kansas City enters into this conversation is saying, if you've gone through lawful processes, if you have a work permit, if you're being tracked by the United States government, then you are someone who has a lawful presence in Missouri or Kansas today. We can help you find resources and work. That does not mean that 100,000 people who just came across the border yesterday can have those resources or help here. We couldn't handle that either. It does speak to a long-term solution. That's why I'll listen to people who have long-term solutions. I was on Ted Cruz's Twitter today, and I don't see a solution other than, kind of saying the administration stinks. Maybe that feels good and gets people excited, but I'm more interested in seeing how we can holistically address it. And I think that's one part of Kansas City's attempt to help.
Yeah. I mean, there was a very effective model, as you may recall. You're a man of national politics, as we talk about. Stay in Mexico. You want to claim asylum. You wait in Mexico until your, asylum hearing is able to be heard. And amazingly, a lot of people didn't end up coming because they weren't legitimate asylum claims. It's like that worked out pretty well. Would you agree to that?
I think that is a workable solution. What would you do with the people who are present here now? I mean, how do you actually address this issue with the millions of people who are present here now, including those who currently have work permits? Mm-hmm. And I think that's in some ways what we're trying to address. And in this conversation, there's another debate about price of labor, quantity of labor, and all of that. We have big projects around here. We certainly have a need for labor in rural Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, and Nebraska all around us. Much of that labor, even today, is fulfilled by any number of folks, some undocumented, others documented. I think finding a way to get people out of the shadows so they are actually obtaining basic resources, care, trusting of law enforcement and beyond is something that is better for our communities and our country long term than actually trying to operate with blinders on and suggest that in any way the economies, particularly of the rural states all around us, are not supported by this type of labor, and actually finding some way where we're not getting taxes from them, we're not getting the types of investments and resources and safety and security that we need. Those are going to be the types of solutions that I think responsible governors in this region of America are looking at long term.
So to tie this all back, Mayor Lucas, you said the number that you're looking at for these folks, you're saying 50 is the number of people you're looking at, 50. Is that right, or did I misunderstand that?
I said it's more like 50 than 50,000.
Oh,
right?
okay. That's a big. Oh no! What does that mean then? 5,000. Right. I mean, you got to have a number though if you're going to run an operation like this, right? You got to have a number in mind.
I think that, no. What we are doing in Kansas City, this is why I said it's more like 50, is to say, yeah, we welcome individuals, right? The reason this is so cost intensive is because each person, wherever they're present right now, usually gets some counselor, some person who helps them find housing, helps them find a job, and all of that. Having talked to our immigration-related resources here, and we've had them for years, and they do outstanding work in Missouri and northeastern Kansas, is to say that, no, we don't want to overburden them in the slightest. If there is a person, if there is a family, if there is a group of people who are interested in coming here to work in the same way that we worked individually with each of the 500 Afghan refugees, we welcome that. But no, this is not some sort of pledge that says all of a sudden we are welcoming 10, 15,000 new people to try to, integrate quickly here. I understand scale and speed of things and efficiency of operations, but I don't think Kansas City can handle that burden right now.
All right, Mayor Lucas, thank you. We always appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you next week. Hopefully you felt like that was reasoned, calm, and objective over the last 15 minutes. We appreciate it.
Exceptional conversation. Student loans last week, this week. What's the fun national issue for next one? But have a good weekend in the meantime.
You tell me. We'll follow the storylines. That is Quinton Lucas on KCMO Talk Radio.